Meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Because it is a special meeting, there was on this.
I already signed it.
Everybody signed it? Okay,
Yep.
good. Just wanted to make
And I
sure.
put it back on the desk so you didn't use it.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, so I will start off with the proclamation. Actually, I will start off with a precursor to the proclamation. It was requested that the town board, and we did this 5 years ago, the decency movement is a nonpartisan grassroots effort dedicated to restoring civility and mutual respect in our daily lives. With the support of students across the country, the campaign took flight 5 years ago, and we did have a proclamation back then on May 14th, 2019. It is something that is done in conjunction with the school, and yesterday at their school board meeting, they had a similar proclamation, I believe, and the students are promoting, and I passed around, there's bumper stickers or stickers and buttons. I have one on my jacket, but it's too warm for the jacket. Decency, yes, it's on the back of my computer too. So I will read the proclamation. Town of Shelter Island wishes to proclaim a day of decency, whereas we recognize that a fundamental tenet of civil discourse, whether on a local, state, or national level, is the understanding of and respect for the differences that should exist in a democracy, and that basic decency in conduct encourages understanding and respect. By this proclamation, we endeavor to encourage decency in our community, whereas we encourage every citizen to strive to personify decency in both conduct and conversation, setting examples for our schools, local businesses, and all community affiliations. Whereas all citizens of our community aspire to uphold decency, the basic standard of civility that all Americans deserve. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Shelter Island hereby proclaims May 14th, 2024, Day of Decency in conjunction with National Decency Day, and will proudly wear and display the decency buttons and stickers on that and every day. In witness thereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the town of Shelter Island to be herein affixed. Amber Brock Williams, Supervisor; Margaret Ann Larson, Councilwoman; Albert Dixon, Councilman; Benjamin Diet, Councilman. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we will pass this on to the school who.
And be it not just today, but every
Yes,
day.
exactly. Yes.
Madam Supervisor, thank you.
So we will now close the special meeting. I need a motion for that.
Make a motion, we close the special meeting.
Second.
Regular meeting.
Yep, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. All right, so starting off the work session, we have public comments. Is there anyone? Yep, and it has to be something that is not on our agenda and is not pertaining to legislation for which there will be public hearing in the future.
This fits within that. I think it's also short and decent.
Perfect.
So this concerns lot mergers. I don't think that's part of the legislation at all. It is in the context of zoning and stuff like that, and protection of the environment, especially the near shore. And it is consistent with, doesn't conflict at all with your work that you're doing on proportionality, which I may violate my own statement by saying you did an excellent job so far from what I read this morning. It's fantastic. Maybe it's revision, et cetera, whatever. Shelter Island, and I'm not going to be speaking specifically on any specific lot or anything, whatever. And I'm also speaking on my own behalf, not on behalf of anybody else. I'm just going to talk in general terms on the subject of lot mergers. Shelter Island has no what's called statutory merger provision. Some of you may have been around long enough to know that a town board in July of 2018 repealed the statutory merger provision, which would cause a merger by operation of law if two lots, like a non-conforming and a conforming lot, were owned by the same person. Under the old act, it was automatically by operation of law considered merged. There was also a provision that allowed the owner to simply merge lots at their request. That was all taken out on July 7, 2018 with section 133-22. And then March 22, 2019, you also eliminated other related provision 133.2, 133.21. Those are all gone. And on February 9th, 2018, prior to this repeal, you had a resolution that suspended the operation and also voided any mergers that had taken place prior where the landowner didn't get notice from the town. So they were voided at that time. And the reason for all this was the town board said in its resolution, in the whereas clauses, there were unintended consequences of the merger provision. It didn't further town goals. There was inconsistent application, and there were some undesirable results because it was sort of a one-size-fit-all kind of a thing. So the result of all of that was to revert any town merger, any lot merger, back to the town board approval. There's a high court there's a case in the state court of appeals that said you can't just merge lots because you commonly own it, because if that were true, you wouldn't need a statutory merger provision that would automatically do that. So it does revert to the town. And the US Supreme Court in 2019, and I'll give the town attorney the cites for this, said specifically on lot mergers in 2019 that town boards, municipalities have jurisdiction and can regulate lot mergers specifically. Strangely, I was shocked to find that case, but they said that, and there's no takings under the Fifth Amendment and stuff like that. Now, you don't confuse lots of records with tax lots, sometimes called zoning lots versus tax lots. A lot of record may contain multiple tax lots, and one tax lot may contain multiple zoning lots or lots of record. I've talked to some of the top land use lawyers in Suffolk County who basically told me this. And also I did some research. A lot of record is not merged simply because the county reassigned the numbers for the lots. They can have one number for two tax lots to simplify for the assessor's simplification, for the taxpayer's simplification, but that doesn't affect the legal boundaries of the underlying lots of record. Even the Suffolk County Tax Map Division on its website says, go back, this is for the purposes of signing numbers. If you want to do any building, go back to your local zoning ordinances and go back to your local town to get approval, and all that. So they recognize that what they do doesn't have any effect on it. So the town board has the ability to review each situation, and I would suggest each situation is fairly unique. And past precedents aren't really problems. There are some lot mergers or building that occurred back in 1965, and they didn't formally merge the lots, and you go back and say there's one house on the two lots, you're obviously going to give permission in retrospect. That voiding that occurred back in 2019 shouldn't have unintended, or 2018 shouldn't have unintended consequences either. There was something locally where I live where the town board allowed the lot merger because they were constrained by a court order, to merge the lots, and I disagreed with the court order, but it is what it is. You're constrained by the court order. You had to do what you had to do. So that's not a bad precedent for you at all. Along Tut Hill Drive, there are lots along the shore, and next to it is like a 25, sometimes 50-foot strip that was meant to be for the guy across the street, like me, because I have one of those 25 strips, to use it for access to the shore, okay? And what seems to be happening today is people want to merge the lot to build a bigger house, when the bigger lot, the conforming lot, was intended for a certain size house. Within reason, you go ahead and take something that was intended for access across the street, merge it to your own lot, conforming lot, and then you can build a bigger house. So the proportionality legislation starts out, well, what is a lot? What is the square foot of the lot? I'm saying what the predecessor to that is, what is the lot? Okay, is it these two merged lots? Can they merge a lot? Should they be able to merge a lot? And you have to maybe consider in context of implementing this legislation that you're thinking of now in the context of what is a lot and should they be merged. Finally, at the end of the day, the town board could do one of three things, okay? If it's asked what they should do in a particular situation for a merger. One is to permit the merger, okay? Allowing for a larger house if under the circumstances it would, for example, fit within your current legislation.
Just a clarification there. Lot mergers are done, I believe, at the planning board level, not at the town board level.
Okay,
Just-
I think otherwise, because I was told, and you'll talk to your town attorney on that. I was told that subdivisions and lot line movements is not the same as lot mergers. And the legislation that you did in 2018, in February, specifically said the town's gonna take its time, because it's really complex stuff. We're gonna take our time to study lot mergers So that would suggest that there was, and if you take a look, when you repealed the legislation, whether this is good or not, you never went in and said who has jurisdiction to make the decision, because you could have given it to the ZBA, and you could have given it to the planning board, but you didn't, you were silent on it. And my suggestion is the fact that you were silent on it and said you're reserving the ability to study this for a while to make sure we're doing the right thing, is that reverts to the town board, not to the planning board. It was never there, and not to the ZBA. The ZBA has the right to interpret the code, chapter 133. However, you repeal the provision they would have interpreted. It's not there, so they have nothing to interpret. So I think it reverts to the town board to make these decisions. So one, you can permit the merger, okay, if you think it's proper to allow whatever the plans were. You can deny the merger altogether, or you can permit the merger on condition that the project meets, like the statute that you're looking at now, the proportionality thing. You can do that as well. So I think that explains just what I wanted to bring to your attention, that part of this mosaic of trying to control house sizes and stuff, this is like all nearshore stuff. It happens to be in our area, we have a lot of these things, and I hate to see the entire area precedent be set by allowing one kind of merger like this to basically allow all these oversized houses occur, because they're merging lots and getting around this proportionality you're trying to do. So this is a potential loophole that I think you should take a look at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else in the physical audience?
Hey, everybody. Joe Denny. Hi, how are you? So I just want to follow up on the skate park and just to see where we can go next with maybe moving it or rebuilding it where it is. But I noticed that it's locked up now, so the only legal place anybody has on the island to skate, we can't actually skate. So it still was skatable. It wasn't in great shape. It still was skatable. So I don't know why it's locked up now. Who decided that?
Was it always open, unlocked before?
I noticed some locks, padlocks on it. I don't know. Maybe I didn't go up to check to see if it was.
But before in the past,
No, it was open. Yeah.
just unlocked.
Oh yeah. So what do you just wanted to get a feel for what you guys think about what we can do about maybe moving it to the center or.
I guess the first thing is to see why it's locked.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's,
I mean, thanks for bringing that to the table, Joe. I mean, I don't know why it's locked. I know you're a skateboarder. What do you think? How do you think? What do you think about the whole thing?
The whole thing? I think it'd be better to have it in the center. Makes more sense to have it near the school. And we could, keep it small, keep it nice, professional. I've been talking to the designer of Montauk, the new one that just went Montauk. And, he's an incredible park designer. We could do something small, simple, nothing too dangerous. And affordable. So.
I guess the question is to try to find
that's the key is
a place to,
location. Yeah.
a location.
I was thinking right next to the basketball court in Fisk Field.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
I have to talk to people. I mean, that's a space that doesn't get used very often.
Right. Yeah, 'cause it's not-
Soccer,
definitely
I'm
be
not sure when
used
they
there.
set up soccer, if they use all that space, but
Right.
it's something to talk to the school about.
Rec department.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, we could talk to the rec department, but it's also part of we need to do a townwide facilities master plan, and so that would be part of there's a recreation component that needs to be built into that as well.
Okay.
So it will warrant further discussion, but we'll bring you back into the loop on this.
Okay, so should I expect to be contacted from somebody? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, and also, I wanted to ask about the, do you know the town code on solar arrays in your yard? Are they allowed or not allowed?
It doesn't allow for ground mount.
No, anybody know why that is?
Not sure. I think someone didn't like the aesthetics of it back in the day, but.
Yeah.
not-
It's a good question, because I would like to put one in.
With all the big houses going up, I mean, the demand for electricity is very, very, overwhelming. It's only gonna get worse, I'm privy to some of this information, being a master electrician. So, it really is a problem. There's a problem for electrolysis, because of the demand is so high, especially in summer. So, maybe we can think about, rewriting that law or something, because, if somebody wants to put up solar, it really shouldn't be restricted. And it's, in my case, I don't have good light on my roof, but my backyard has light, so it wouldn't make sense to put an array. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up.
All right.
So maybe that's something you guys can get heads together on. To me, it makes a lot of sense, so.
It's something that Green Options has been looking at too. So the Green Options Committee has been talking about
Okay, I should-
solar on a lot of municipal buildings and stuff, and also other things that are challenging us when it comes to homeowners installing it. And that was one of the things, that we don't allow ground mount, and the question is why. So we'll have to sort that out.
Okay, well, I guess that's it, so.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay,
Thanks, Joe.
All right.
I see
See you guys.
you just came on. Hold on a second, Joe. You're muted, Kevin.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah, I just wanted to address why we locked it. I'm sorry, I thought it was unlocked again. We had locked it for a while because there was a tremendous amount of debris that had washed down from one of the neighboring construction sites into the lot. There was a lot of sand and stuff in there, and the guys just did it the other day where they blew everything out and we swept it again. So they may have locked it inadvertently when they after they cleaned it all up, but I'll make sure it gets open today.
Thanks, Ken, appreciate it.
No problem.
Yes,
All
sir.
right, see you guys, have a great day.
Okay. Hey, Joe. Anyone else in the physical audience with non-agenda items? Moving to the Zoom audience, Sean Davey, I noticed at the beginning of the meeting you had your hand up. If there's anyone else in the Zoom audience who wishes to speak, you put your hand up or turn on your video. Okay, then we will proceed with the next agenda item. And that is Sonic Estuary Program, partnership that we have with them. We have Joyce Novak here and Valerie. I was gonna say Valerie.
Hi, how are you? We have a small presentation for you. And so thank you for having us. I just wanted to give you a brief update and, as we do annually for the town, and talk about some things locally and regionally that are happening. Next slide, please. You can go to the next slide. And so for any of you who are new and not quite sure, we are a national estuary program. This means that we are authorized under the Clean Water Act and congressionally every year receive a portion of the federal budget that we are obligated to leverage at least one-to-one with local funds. We are non-regulatory and non-enforcement, and we specifically set ourselves up as a partnership so that everybody who comes to the table has a voice in our decision-making and how we spend money. Next slide, please. And so how do we make decisions? We're guided by a comprehensive management plan. This was updated in 2020. The former chair of our local government committee was, of course, Shelter Island Councilman Colligan, who was very involved in this process with us. Next slide, please. And it sets up our governance. Here is our org chart. On the left there, the management committee is really where the bulk of the decisions get made, who we work very closely with, but we have local government committee, citizens advisory committee, and a technical advisory committee, and then many more subcommittees under that I will not trouble you to have to worry about, but we have worked really hard in the past 6 years to get the voices of local government up that chain. So we increased our local government voting members on our management committee from 1 to 2. And our policy committee has 1 local government rep, 1 state rep, 1 federal rep, and 1 citizen rep. Currently that is Supervisor Al Krupski. So if you ever need to liaise with him, he is the person who represents local governments on the policy committee. Next slide, please. And so just briefly, some things that we're doing around town, around the Peconic watershed, rather. We launched the Byron Young Fish Passage at Little River. That's a tributary of the Peconic River that has one of the largest, if not the largest, alewife run in the Peconic system. And we monitor that alewife run every year. Some of the Shelter Island funding that was given to the program is used directly for the alewife monitoring that supports students, equipment, data, and Dr. Kelly McCartan, who heads up that endeavor for us. We work with New York State and the Cooperative Extension on annual horseshoe crab monitoring. And have recently moved into more wildlife monitoring. We're directly funding otter survey throughout the East End, and working with CTUC on the Long Island Wildlife Monitoring Network. Next slide, please. We have an annual water quality report that comes out for this year. The 2023 report is going to be part of our larger State of the Bays report or State of the Estuary report. And this will look at all of the data that we have from Summit County and the USGS. Starting in October, we're working directly with the Gogler Lab at Stony Brook University to increase that. Chris's team there has been for 2 years now going into embayments around the watershed, specifically looking at harmful algal blooms and what is the nitrogen threshold. So how much do we have to decrease it to not have blooms of certain species? We're very excited for that work, and he will be directly reporting that with some online tools in the coming year. Our Eastern Peconic Blue Carbon Project, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about in a second. There's some work happening on Shelter Island with that. And we are moving into a place, we have some Suffolk County capital funds ring fence to do a Shelter Island wetland protection strategy. We've been trying to do this for a couple of years. We're finally in a position to be able to do this, where we want an assessment of all the wetlands, salt marsh wetlands, on Shelter Island, and to work with the town board and the community on a restoration and protection strategy. Right from there, we have a document where we can go ahead and pick pieces of that to fund over time, right? But we need that first document, that first assessment strategy in place first. The USGS solute transport model has been very delayed. After COVID, the USGS ran into some staffing issues, but we're hoping to have that released by the end of the year. This is a key piece of the nitrogen puzzle. It will tell us about the legacy pollution, right? We have the Suffolk County subwatershed, which is looking at the here and now, prioritizing the 0 to 2 travel zone. This is really going to look at that historical nitrogen and to help us identify places where potentially we can do other things or focus our efforts or mitigate our expectations. Next slide, please. We're working on wetland restoration at Agabonic Harbor, Broad Cove, and the Western Estuary. This is a Peconic Land Trust site, where we're working on some water access issues. And in June of this year, we will be doing an eelgrass aerial flyover to map all of the eelgrass in our system. We do an annual survey, but this is not a quantitative assessment that we do annually. The flyover will be. The Peterson Lab at Stony Brook University will be ground truthing this, so divers, boots on the ground and in the water, to delineate where all of our eelgrass beds. Then we'll see how it's changed since 2014, which is the last time we did this. There's been a lot of changes. We also received $250,000 from the federal government for a coastal watershed grant to look at areas where fresh water is coming in underneath the salt water, to hopefully prioritize those areas for some pilot work. I want to stress that restoration throughout Long Island, especially in the Peconics, has been largely unsuccessful. So we want to hone in on areas that have fresh water coming in, because it's largely a temperature issue, and see if we can do some test plantings in these areas and see if that works before we spend money on restoration. 3 Mile Harbor, we are piloting a permeable permeable, reactive barrier there. And we're committed to monitoring that for several years. We see these kind of going in the ground all over the place without the data to support how well they're working. So we're trying to contribute some information to that conversation in hopes that that will inform that, before people start putting them in everywhere, to inform that conversation. Next slide, please. I have 2 online tools that I would really urge you to check out. One is a nitrogen load reduction best management practice. This goes through 8 different types of BMPs that you could look at. It is a parcel by parcel map that will give you a cost benefit analysis of various types of installations, ranging from a simple rain garden to a bioswale to more engineered solutions for both homeowners and municipalities, to see some of these things are very expensive, to see if it's worth it on some of these properties. So we're just rolling that out this year with the hopes that by the end of the year, we can get an assessment of if we need to tweak it, how well, how much people are using it. The critical lands protection strategy has been out there for a while. That is a parcel by parcel assessment that looks at some climate change impacts in the area, including groundwater increasing, storm surge, increased precipitation, to help towns prioritize parcels for acquisition. Also doing some wetland restoration in Orient and in Southold. Next slide, please. And we're doing 2 studies that we think will be really helpful for our communities. One is looking at aquaculture and community ecology. We know when Suffolk County did their 10-year review of their lease program for oyster aquaculture, there was some pushback with communities. So we want to put some data to that. We want to see what's happening around the cages. We want to see what's happening in the benthos underneath the cages. This project is well underway. We have a year of work in, and so far what we're seeing anecdotally is they create new habitats and they encourage other organisms to live with them. So that's an interesting turn. We're excited about this project. And we're running an eco-sim model. We're looking at all the fisheries data that New York State has collected for the past 30 years. And we want to couple that with some current information, some temperature information, and we want to see what species are staying, what species are migrating north with climate change, and who's coming in, and what we can expect. So that's been severely delayed also, in large part after COVID. Getting a postdoc onto that has been a little problematic, but we're due to finish that hopefully by the end of the year. And we're in the process of a hardened shoreline assessment. So we have a desk-based study of docks and bulkheads. We are ground truthing that in the next 2 months. And so by the fall, we'll have a tool that we can launch to people online to look at hardened shorelines. See the last slide.
Bay scallops.
And the bay scallops. So PEP convenes twice a year a technical committee of the experts, largely run by Dr. Boss in the lab at the pathology lab at Stony Brook University, who's been doing tests on scallops, both in the Peconics from South Shore bays and working with researchers in Nantucket to look at the problem of the parasite that in the Peconics really has not bounced back. The good news is that they have, after this year, some strains of scallops from Moriches Bay and from Nantucket that are genetically the same, and that seem to be resistant to the heat stressors that the Peconic scallops were experiencing. And so the next phase will be looking at whether we can use those scallops to seed the Peconic bays. We'll be holding in partnership with Sea Grant a Bay Scallop Symposium in the fall to release all of the data. I'm very excited to support Stony Brook on that. Next slide, please. The USGS Continuous Monitoring Station, as you know, went by the South Ferry and Shelter Island. We've had some difficulties setting up a field trip with the school. We want to do an annual trip to bring the school together with the USGS and the scientists out in the field. We have spoken to the school superintendent. We will reach back out to you guys for assistance maybe in helping us get that moving. We made a commitment to make this an educational tool for Shelter Island children, and we'd really like to see that through. Next slide, please. And our shoreline adaptation initiative. So we're working in partnership with Sea Grant. We have 4 main groups of policymakers, regulators, homeowners, and implementers. These are all the different groups that are involved in decision-making at the shoreline. We're really trying to stem the tide of bulkheads. Sometimes they are replaced when there is less than 20% of the bulkhead left. You can barely see it. Every town has code. Every town's code is different than the next town, and everybody seems to run into a barrier with permitting at the state level. So what we are trying to do is work with New York State to have a conversation about how can we work together. We're told by town engineers and town planners that before Superstorm Sandy, they worked closely with New York State permitters, and that doesn't seem to happen anymore. Our vision and our greatest dream is a joint permit with local governments. That way homeowners have one-stop shopping for permitting and towns can work together with the state. It'll be a long road, but we're really trying hard to bring the state to the table and open up that conversation to trust local government engineers and planners who know their areas better than Google Earth does. Next slide, please. And the bipartisan infrastructure law, years 1 and 2. We have some money on the ground. We're about halfway through this funding. As I went through, Broad Cove, Meeting House, Creek is stormwater, Riverside Wetlands in Southampton. Goose Creek is doing an interesting project in the town of Southold. In that subcatchment, they're completely eliminating discharge to water, to surface water, sending those pipes to groundwater. It's an interesting model. I know the Protection Committee is also discussing this for the town, and the Peconic East Blue Carbon Shoreline Protection Project. Next slide, please. Otherwise known as changes, creating habitat, acidification reduction, nitrogen bioextraction, guarding our shorelines, ecosystem longevity, and sequestration of carbon. We're spending 2 years of money at $600,000 to launch this program, which involves a combination of shellfish, sugar kelp, and seagrass. And Shelter Island sites are involved in this. Next slide, please. On Shelter Island, we'll be by the South Ferry and in Menantic Creek. We are working with the team at Stern University that has had great success in Shinnecock Bay using natural systems to solve all of those, not solve, but alleviate some of the stressors of climate change that are in the name, and have some really good numbers to put to some of the work that they've done, and we want them to do it here on the East End. So this is where we're starting. We've had kelp in the water for about a year, and we are moving forward in these areas. I will look for large-scale federal funding to supplement this for the next coming years after this BIL, the infrastructure law funds run out. But we're very excited about this and committed to keeping this team out here for at least 10 years to see if we can have the same success they had in Shinnecock. Next slide, please. And here's just some pictures of that's the kelp from this winter at the Shelter Island site. And those are the oyster reefs that are in Shinnecock that we hope to replicate for low energy wave abatement in areas where it's appropriate. Next slide, please. We are committing funds. These are going directly to Suffolk County, but to support low middle income households who have already received a septic improvement grant. This is going to give them another 3 years of maintenance costs. We will expand this past LMI households when this group is expended and make it available to everybody. We have $95,000 committed to this. We're going to see how quickly that money runs out, and we do hope to continue to fund this so that people who do get the grant not only have the 3 years that's included with the Summit County grant, but another 3 years after that for maintenance of systems. We know this is something that homeowners have talked about. Next slide, please. And so just generally accomplishments, and really from 22 to 24, we've been doing a lot. We are expanding, we're adding new staff members, and we are implementing 100 acres of wetland restoration. We have over 200 acres of Diogenes fish habitat open in our system. We dedicate $500,000 in water quality monitoring throughout the watershed. We have 5 sub-watershed stormwater installations in planning and implementation phased. We've launched those 2 online tools and support local organizations through our mini grant. We had offered a mini grant in 2022. We'll be doing that again in 2024. That's $25,000 grants that can go to nonprofit partners, community groups for a variety of projects. Next slide, please. And just to get an idea of our current funding, we received a bump up in New York State this year from $550 to $750. Thank you, Assemblyman Fred Field, who was integral in that. Our federal dollars, including BIL, are about $1.7 million. And we look for local government buy-in, as is allowed under the Community Preservation Fund legislation. Next slide, please. And just to give you an idea of how that breaks down per town, this is it. Obviously, Southampton, East Hampton are the bulk of that. Riverhead is still in debt service, and so gives us a town engineer to run our projects in their town, which is extremely helpful because none of us are actually engineers to run engineering projects. And so we look every year for buy-in from Shelter Island. This year it would be $14,025. And I don't think I have another slide. Is there another slide there? Oh, there we go. We have considerably increased funding that comes to the region. When I took this job in 2018, have had $750,000 coming to the region. We have more than quadrupled that in 5 years, even with COVID. So we hope to only get stronger. And what we do and where that is guided, we rely on you for what's most needed. So so glad that the towns, especially Shelter Island, are engaged in the program. Now, I just did a lot of talking, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Okay.
Meetings.
Yes, okay,
know.
I have a couple. And maybe you and I have discussed this before, I'm not sure. Menanche Creek Keepers, you're working on the kelp and oysters. Do you know about their monitoring, what they've got going on locally?
So they're very active in our Citizens Advisory Committee. And we are just, it took a long time for the funding to come into place. We've actually hired an outreach assistant dedicated to some of our BIL projects. This is one of them. She's just been onboarded about a month ago, so she will be working with them to set up meetings so we can really launch this in the community. We've had a lot of interest also from other groups.
I just want to make sure that those connect.
Yes.
As far as considering a direct contribution, I think our WQI committee is more focused on projects. So if you have a project that is relevant to Shelter Island, that would be the approach that I would suggest taking.
Do they do also pay the PEP dues out of the CPF
Yes.
fund every year?
Yes, no,
Yeah.
but this would be in addition to the
Oh, yeah.
14,000. Like if you're looking for something, if you have a project that's Shelter Island specific, then come to our WQI and you can make a proposal.
Yeah, so we are going to look, as we look to get, I'll be asking next year from the 2 senators in the state of New York for a large scale congressional allocation to this project on the East End. And as we're planning for that, we're going to come to the East End towns as sort of additional dollars leveraged. So it would be a project, but we're going to try and have the pieces that are in those towns broken up for that. We are not prepared to do that in 2024, but in 2025, we will do that.
That's all that I had. John has.
I was gonna say, is there anyone in the public? So, John, if you'd like to come forward before we release the pet people?
You mentioned the term, which I couldn't,
If you could identify yourself for the,
tell you. I lived here a long time.
We met, Cockles Harbor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Something permeable, some,
Permeable reactive barrier.
that's why I didn't catch it.
Yeah, so that is, it's a layer of, you have a variety of materials, it's usually wood chips, sometimes oil emulsion, that is put into the ground to try and catch groundwater. And it reduces nitrogen by adding carbon into the system. And it sounds like it's easy, but groundwater is very complicated. And identifying exactly where the plume of historical pollution in the groundwater is where it gets complicated. And how far down or wide you might have to make that barrier to see an increase in the water quality.
Okay, that helps a lot, thank you. Last thing is your organization or have a position pros and cons for splashboards mounted on docks? We haven't been able to reach a conclusion on benefits, positive or negative benefits.
So off the top of my head, I don't, but we can look into that and give information back to the town
Comes up
to
over
disseminate.
and over again. You guys might better see it, take a position to study or something.
Okay, we will look into it.
Think so? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
that is,
Sure. Is anyone else?
is there anyone in the Zoom audience who has a question for Pat? Seeing none. Joyce?
I have a question, George.
Yes.
You're talking about shoreline hardening,
Yes,
and you mentioned bulkheads.
yes.
What about docks? You also mentioned docks. Is there any preliminary information or anything, findings that you have that you can share?
So our assessment of docks at the moment is really going to be presence absence. They don't necessarily, now, I'm not talking about colossally long docks that have not existed in the past and I know are creeping up as wants of certain homeowners. But they don't have the same sediment transport effect and water energy effect that a bulkhead has. Excuse me. And as we all know, the docks do not have that ability to completely wash out homeowners on either side of a bulkhead, the way a bulkhead does. So we're focusing first on docks, on bulkheads. But we will be tallying docks to get a handle on. That's also why we're doing this in the summertime, to get a handle on what is where. Because a lot of towns I know are bombarded with more dock requests coming in or permit applications coming in and understanding how many there are and where they are. They also don't create a barrier to habitat, right? So for us, we also like to look at horseshoe crabs, which it's not, people don't necessarily think this is an important species in their daily lives, but it's an extremely important species in medical science for many reasons. And they can still get under a dock, right, to breed. And the bulkhead completely removes their breeding habitat. So we are looking at that both from the sediment transport side and from the wildlife and habitat side for the bulkheads. And again, docks will be a presence absence part of it.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Quick.
You had a question?
Yeah, on the business of bulkheads.
Yes.
There's one example that I'm aware of in Cockles Harbor where the bulkhead was built. And there's a little area, this is across the Ram's Head Inn, where there's a sandbar that I think had been there in the past. But since the bulkhead was put in, the sandbar can almost all the way go to the bulkhead now. And even when you have a low tide, you can see sand going up against the bulkhead. Apparently that was approved somehow 5 years ago, whenever it was done. And I understand that DEC must approve these kinds of bulkheads. I'm not sure about that. And when they do approve them, there's usually a provision that says if you're going to affect navigable waters, you got to remediate. So I'm wondering whether the actual property owner who put a bulkhead in would be responsible for remediating. In this instance, that we'd have to do a dredging, to get that navigable again. Because there are a lot of people, like I have a 18-foot Boston whaler, and I can hardly get to my friend's house. I wouldn't dare to do it on low tide. But it used to be navigable water, and he's got a sailboat. He can only go out certain times. So it's really quite a problem.
So this is all part of the conversation that I was saying before we had this group. Every bulkhead requires a DEC permit. And DEC is not necessarily liaising with local permitters who might have local knowledge about problems that can exist. And it is a big question, so who is responsible? We know that when that bulkhead comes in, it is going to affect the sediment.
Yes.
We can't exactly always pinpoint where, but we'll have a pretty good idea who's responsible then, right?
The DEC permit will say that the owner is responsible for making sure what they're doing with the bulkhead does not affect navigable waters.
And
Yeah.
I have yet to see an example where the person who put in the bulkhead is held responsible by New York State.
Oh, maybe we can do that.
So I don't know, and I'm not an attorney, so I can't legally
Neither
answer
am
that
I.
question. But it's a growing issue for every town on the east end of Long
That's
Island.
interesting to hear.
And we are trying to find a way forward in our shoreline adaptation work to where local and state governments can work together on that with much better tools in the toolbox about sediment transport, local conditions, so they can make more informed decisions.
Thank
Anyone else?
That's it. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trace.
The next item on the agenda is Cityscape Consultants, and we have Susan Raybold with us on Zoom. You can turn on your video and unmute. This is a project that is a potential project with joint towns, and Susan will get into exactly which towns are involved, but it is something to monitor. It's a proposed wireless study project. And so the request here is whether or not we are interested as a town to join the effort. Southhold's involved, North Haven is involved, possibly Sag Harbor. But I will turn it over to you, Susan.
Okay, thank you so much for having me today. You may recall in January, as I was traveling through, I stopped in and said hello and addressed you all. And this is more of a formal presentation. Shall I share my screen to get to the presentation? Is that all right? Or?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Give me just a moment to get to that. Let's see. There we go. Can you see it on your end?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'm Susan Raybold. I work with Cityscape Consultants, and we work exclusively for local government nationwide. Our project team includes radio frequency engineers, legal and planning professionals, and we work just in the niche market of wireless communications. And we are proposing to do a wireless analysis and master plan for the North Fork area. That would include Southold, Sag Harbor, North Haven Village, hopefully Shelter Island, and Greenport Village. And the project includes coming in and doing preliminary research of the area, looking at all of the infrastructure where wireless communications is currently located, and then doing simulated mapping from there to look at your gaps, compare that to your policies to see if there's something in your zoning code that's creating those gaps, provide you solutions to filling in those gaps, provide you policies that regulate and promote that type of deployment pattern, and to help you improve your wireless communications. So when I'm talking about wireless communications, I'm talking about your handset, your tablets that use subscriber-based subscriptions for, say, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, Dish Wireless. And I'm not talking about broadband that's through fiber. This is wireless communications. You may be familiar with some of the infrastructure. I believe you have 2 facilities on Shelter Island presently that are towers. And so when I'm talking about network planning and radio frequency engineering, I'm referring to this type of wireless infrastructure that is used to make your cell phones work and any other devices that you use to roam and use the wireless network. You may be very familiar with the macro cell type facilities. These antennae are large facilities. They are the backbone of the wireless network. They provide the greatest coverage and capacity. And then you also have what is called a small cell wireless facility, which by definition of federal code, maximum height is 50 feet, and the antenna is no larger than 3 cubic feet per volume. And the signal from this area is very short. So the signal from these macro cells can go out up to a couple of miles. Your small wireless facility, which is really used to densify the network, only propagates about 500 feet up to a quarter mile. And you'll see that you'll have a combination of both of these types of facilities to make the network work. So presently, you have 3 types of non-concealed facilities, sort of give you a visualization. You have the guide tower, the monopoles, and the lattice. And those don't have to be non-concealed. They can be concealed, so or semi-concealed. When I refer to a semi-concealed facility, this is an example of a monopole that's been painted. The antenna are painted at the top to have the facility blend in with the natural environment a little bit more. I also consider a concealed or a monopine to be a semi-concealed facility, because even though it looks sort of more like a natural piece of equipment in the landscape, depending, of course, on the density of the branches, you can still see those antenna array. A a completely concealed facility is an example here where the antenna are behind this radio shroud, radio transparent shroud, and all the cabling is interior to the pole so that you don't see any of the antenna or the coax cable like you do on this one. We also have a change in definition from the Federal Code of Regulation that references any facility that antennas go on that is not a tower is considered a base station. So if you have a water tank, if you have a rooftop, a high tension power line, and the equipment goes on those existing facilities, those are called base stations. And these are non-concealed base stations. And then these are examples of semi-concealed, again, painted, or they are painted and matching the outside of the wall of a building. Those would be semi-concealed, or completely concealed is an example of this facility that was built and the equipment is behind these faux dormers, and the base equipment is here at the lower level, and you would not know that that's a wireless facility. These are all sorts of things that you can put into your code to have facilities look similar to these or any other type of facility that you think would be more appropriate going forward, that we can help you with once we know what your gaps are. When I refer to small wireless facilities, these are examples of the smaller antenna. They typically go on an existing utility pole, or perhaps the pole is built and the equipment is put on it. These are non-concealed small wireless facilities in the right-of-way. This is an example of a concealed facility because, again, the antenna's behind this radio transparent shroud and the cabling is interior to the pole, and you don't see any of this equipment on the pole at this location. These facilities can go on public property, they can go on utility easements, they can go on private property, they can be built for single tenants, they can be built for multiple tenants. These are all sorts of things that you can regulate. So once Cityscape has gone into a community and we have identified the location of the facilities, we provide you a map. And the map will show you where the macro cells are, where the small wireless facilities are, where public safety is located. And if you happen to have any public safety sites with wireless communication equipment on it, then we'll point that out as well. We're going to be doing the study of the community and a 1 mile perimeter around each community, because the equipment that's located in the 1 mile perimeter will have an impact on the community's wireless propagation pattern. And if we were to exclude those locations, then it would give an unrealistic view of what's really happening in the field. Our propagation modeling includes vegetation, it includes topography, it includes building heights, and other clutter that may be characteristic to your community. We will then look at the overall survey of what you have in terms of the type of tower or base station, whether it's on public or private property, in the right-of-way, in a utility easement, if it's concealed, if it's non-concealed, semi-concealed, and we provide you a snapshot of that. Once that's completed, and once you have agreed that we've captured all of the sites, that's when we get into the modeling. And we use a gradation of colors, sort of a prism of colors, from yellow to blue. So this is an example of sites that we've assessed for Albemarle County, which is in Virginia. And each of these dots represents locations where they have wireless infrastructure. And where you see the yellow, that signifies that the antenna power level can provide wireless coverage inside of a building, in a vehicle, and outdoors. Where you see green, those shades represent out or in vehicle and outdoor coverage, but not necessarily in vehicle. Where there are blue shades, those areas are really just outdoors. And where there is no coloration, those areas are the definite gaps. We want to concentrate on the blue and the no coloration areas. And we also do this modeling out for 10 years. We look at your current conditions. We model for 6G, which is expected to deploy in around 2030. And we take into consideration your network capacity constraints during your peak visitor seasons in the community, because the capacity causes the coverage area to shrink. So you could have coverage in some of these areas during the winter when there's no vegetation on the trees, and perhaps you have fewer people living in the community. And then in summertime, the area can shrink considerably because you have absorption from the vegetation, and you have more people using the network simultaneously. And so your coverage and capacity can change seasonally. We also look at the coverage maps by the individual service providers. Not all the providers have deployed at the same time. Not all the providers have the same coverage footprint, but you're required to provide access into the community for all of the service providers. This map on the left demonstrates a more mature build out. The map on the right is a service provider that has not built out as many sites. This service provider on the right, has to have equal access to the community to build out their sites. We want to know, why is there this disparity? And sometimes we find that in policy. We compare the demographics, as I mentioned, to the deployment pattern. And then we start looking at why perhaps there are these holes, these gaps. In this particular community, just for an example, we found that through this exercise and looking at their maps, that they were limiting the height of their towers to be just above the ambient tree height. And so they had almost 100 towers that were only single tenant poles. And the height of the towers being just above the ambient tree height was prohibiting the pattern propagation to go out very far, but it was also reducing the number of co-locations. And so we were running into they were running into a situation where every tenant had to have their own pole instead of one tower that accommodated multiple tenants. And we estimated if they continued down this path, they'd end up with about 625 total poles to fill in all the gaps in the areas with just outdoor coverage. Once we have that information, we provide you some possible solutions. We work with you on your goals and objectives for what you're trying to accomplish visually in the community. And then for this particular community, which is Springdale, Utah, these are some maps that we provided them. So they had tremendous gaps throughout their community. We gave them some scenarios of just building out macro cells and where those sites would need to be, an approximate height. And then we showed them a small wireless facility deployment plan. And again, you see a lot more facilities here because the signal doesn't propagate as far as the macro cell. And then we showed them a build out of a combination of macro cells and small wireless. Interesting fact here is that their current code promoted the use of small wireless facilities over the macro cells. When they saw how many small wireless facilities they were going to need, the community changed their mind. We put all this information into a poll, a community poll. They did an online survey. It was open for 3 weeks. They could go in, they could vote on the pattern that they wanted. And almost 90% of those who participated in the poll identified that they wanted this macro cell, small cell plan. So what we were able to then do is also look at heights and help them come up with the right height for where those sites would be visually. And then we took all that information and we've put it into their policy. We're helping them rewrite their code. So when the industry comes in to deploy in those gap areas, we have a process in place that steers them towards the propagation pattern that they prefer. So I was very interested in looking at your draft comprehensive plan, because your chapter 10, Utilities, Sustainability, and Resilience chapter, talks specifically about the need for more communication infrastructure. You identified in there that you have 2 cell towers, but it's not identified who is on those cell towers, how tall they are, whether or not they can accommodate more co-locations, and you don't know what the coverage pattern is from those existing 2 sites. And your goal number 10-6 is population and businesses over time in a way that contributes to the character of the island. And so everything that I've just described to you fits beautifully into what you want to accomplish through your draft comprehensive plan and identified in this particular chapter. So what we're proposing to do with the community is a overview of the wireless deployment, because what's going on in Southold could affect propagation patterns on Shelter Island. Propagation from Shelter Island could affect North Hayden Village and Southold. We would like to do a snapshot of the whole area. Then each individual community will get their own individual plan based on the community characteristics, the goals and objectives from each community, and where your existing infrastructure is and what gaps are created from that existing infrastructure. Each community will receive the assessment of the infrastructure. The estimated propagation map will provide 3 meetings to the community to show the results of the mapping, present to you potential fill-in scenarios. We will help you with putting an online survey together for the community to get involved in the process and give feedback. And then we will take all that information, review your existing code and policy, and give you recommendations on changes you could make to accomplish what has been provided in the feedback from the polls, and making sure it's consistent with the new Code of Federal Regulation guidelines, and then a final document based on this process, which would be an analysis and a code that you could take to be approved. The estimated timeline to put all this together for the communities is 6 to 8 months from the start of the project to the point of adoption. And that is a tentative timeline. If a community needs for it to be expedited, we can do that. Each community can have their own timeline. So for example, if Sag Harbor wanted to expedite and go more streamlined on their process, but Southold wanted to go slower, we can make those adjustments. The only thing that is really key to making sure that the proposed fees stay in place is that when Cityscape comes up to do the assessments, we need to do the assessments for each community at that time that we come up. If we, which is why I'm trying to get as many communities on board right now, because if a community opts to wait and do this at a later time, I would have to start basically from scratch. And to do this as a single community is about a $50,000 project proposal. By combining communities together and doing the assessments at one time, coming up with the templates for the maps for the area, and being able to follow presentation templates, then if 3 communities come in, I can reduce the cost per community to around $35,000. Right now, we have Sag Harbor, North Hayden Village, and Southold who have committed to being part of this project. If Shelter Island joins the project, then the cost for all 4 communities comes down to $28,700. And if Greenport joins the project, then the price would come down to around $23,400 for each community. And that, and if that cost still needs to come down, the only way I can really do that is if I were to not do some of the services that are included in the scope. So for example, if you were not interested in the public policy changes, and you only wanted the analysis and you only wanted the scenarios, then I could reduce that your cost down accordingly. But if you wanted the full package, then these are the fixed prices that we have in place. So I know that was a lot of information very quickly, and I am available for questions. We did a very similar project for the town of East Hampton. You can go to their website and look at the master plan document that we put together for them. Yours would be a bit different, but because they wanted a very detailed scope. And we have reduced some of the services down from what we did in East Hampton to bring the cost down for the community, because that was a real issue. So we'll be doing less maps than what we did in East Hampton, but that document is available for you to look at and visualize sort of what we were doing. You have questions?
Yes. Anyone from this table?
Well, there's some question for you. We can talk about later.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I mean, when Susan and I originally started talking, after she had popped in that January work session, and I've spoken to East Hampton, who spoke glowingly of the report that you did for them. And Southold and North Haven have both been, you should join, but of course, they want the cost to be lowered, so they have incentive to have us participate. And my big thing is finding the $28,000 in the budget this year.
That's my question.
Yeah.
This is,
Yeah. But I know that, Susan, your timeframe is to get started sometime early this summer.
It is. Does your budget run fiscally or June
Yeah.
to?
It's a fiscal budget, yeah. So we're set for 2024 as far as available money, unless I can find it someplace, which I have a lot of competing priorities at the moment that I'm trying to sort out as we move through the year.
So one option that we could look at is that we come up and we do the assessment and we do the mapping and the poll, and then we look at the policy and the next budget. We could break it out and have a slower process. I mean, it took, it's kind of funny, when we started with East Hampton, they were ready to go, wanted it done quickly. And it ended up being a couple of years, actually ended up being 3-year project, mostly because of the pandemic. But based on the hearing dates and the meeting dates, and things got pushed back, and they kept getting pushed back because their agenda items were full and they weren't ready for us to have this conversation. We could spread it out over, budget years, if that's helpful.
my other question is, now, Meg, would you find this helpful for the comprehensive plan process?
No, we don't need it for the comprehensive plan. I mean, it's one of the things that the comprehensive plan says to look at. Like, we don't need the study done before the comprehensive plan is done. So, it's just in the summer, we know we have faulty service because the system gets overwhelmed. So it's something to look at. It's a recommendation of the comprehensive plan to look into it, to see if there are solutions. So it's just a matter of budgeting and whether or not it's feasible at this point in time.
And I don't really have coverage at my house, which is actually fine.
I did speak to emergency services to see how they felt about this, to see whether or not there was a great need. And they didn't come back with, yes, you have to do this. We're at
Unlike the
risk.
last time, when we put the tower in at the dump, that was really basically on their request.
Yes. Yeah. And the second tower did also help with coverage, as well as the emergency tower that's over. I think
Coverage.
Yeah, the Cowboys name was the second one, but there's
I
also
think-
a tower behind the fire department that was we put up, and I think there's a much smaller one behind PD as well.
None of them get to my house.
Yeah, that's what, but I guess, like, it was nice to have Susan come, and if, in the next week or so, if the public could reach out to my office and let me know whether or not there's, you know, a real demand for this. We haven't been hearing a lot, especially after what you just said about the comprehensive plan, it being more.
I mean, it's definitely a
Summer
recommendation
issue.
in the comprehensive plan to look into it because service is spotty and, you know, there are some times where I don't have service in my house and then sometimes I do. So it was definitely a recommendation to look into it, whether now is the right time, if we have the money available, that's all to the board, really.
I think that's a good idea, Amber, to put it out to the public
Yes,
and see if there's a need. I know there is gaps in coverage, as
Yeah.
Ben said, his location. I hear people in Hay Beach say that
oh,
they don't have good service on occasion, so.
maybe I'll send a blast out to the homeowners associations.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I didn't think of that before,
Yeah.
because I was just more thinking about the
Because
emergency
it's a
services.
complaint, not just wireless service, but, you know, internet and that kind of infrastructure has always been a problem too. A lot of that stems from having one provider, but.
Chief Reed, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, Susan, can you describe what you do as next steps? Let's just imagine you locate areas in our community that have disruptions or lack of service. How does that help the town going forward? Like, we can't mandate people to put cell towers up or mandate that we build towers, and I don't know if we want to do it on our dime. So how does your company interface with providing better coverage?
Okay, so we are not a service provider and we do not build towers and we don't sell a subscription. But what we do hear from the industry quite frequently, we heard this a lot in East Hampton, is that it's been very difficult to get sites approved. And it takes so long to get sites approved that it discourages the industry because they don't know how long there's little expectation on their end to know if a site would be approved, how long it's going to take, and how much resources it's going to take to get a site on air. And so when we can work with the community and come up with a solution that the community can support, then the industry is more inclined to come in and develop more quickly because they know that they're not going to come in for a site and then have it sit for 3 years before it can get approved. And I'm actually in Atlanta getting ready to, I'm at a wireless conference for the industry. We always like to go and get the newest information about what their strategies are and what they're doing so that we can stay abreast of what they're doing. But I'm actually meeting with a company that is deploying, wanting to deploy small wireless facilities in East Hampton. I'm meeting with them tomorrow and talking with them about what their overall plan is for your entire area. And I want to get them involved in this project so that there's support from the industry side and the communities working together to deploy more quickly and to deploy the type of infrastructure that the community will support. So I'm excited about that. And I'm excited to bring that possibility to you all. But that's what Cityscape does on the back end to get more interest into the community to get sites built once the gaps have been identified and you come up with a way to address the coverage.
So once the gaps are identified where they may be, it's back on the town to solicit and or get coverage within those gaps.
No. It's up to the industry would build the sites. The industry
Understood, but we would
come
have to solicit the
Right.
industry.
Well, you don't really put out an RFP for it, if that's what you're asking. Unless you want to put them on, unless you have more public property that they could go on, then that's a whole nother discussion. It is something we can help you with. If you have public property and there's support in the community to use more public property, you become the landlord, like you are at the I guess do you own the recycling center? Okay, so you
Yes.
should be getting rent. Okay, you should be getting rent from that site. And you should be able to manage the ongoing maintenance of that site better because you're the landlord. If you're not getting rent from that site, I'm sorry, but future sites on public property, you should definitely be getting rent and access to those facilities for public safety if the gap for public safety is similar to the commercial wireless. And Officer Reed or Chief Reed, apologize. I'm sure you've experienced where so many people now are using their wireless devices for emergency management calls. We've seen nationwide over 80% of emergency management calls are made from cell phones. And a lot of times it's not that there's not public safety call in or call out into those areas, but there's not enough capacity or coverage in the area where the person is trying to make the call in order to reach 911. Or they reach 911, but the signal triangulates into another community, and then they get sent to the wrong dispatch. And then they have to call back in to get to the correct community where the emergency services is going to respond. So while public safety signal and infrastructure is probably good, the challenge comes when someone is in an area where there isn't enough coverage for their cell phone to work to be able to get the call in. And we heard a lot of stories about that exact situation in East Hampton. If you look at their poll and the responses from the community and the comments from the community, there were dozens of comments from people from a public safety concern, how desperate they were for improved coverage and capacity. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Anyone else with questions? Come on up to the podium.
Bob Cohen. Question, could we find a way to cut to the chase on this analysis? Because we only got two polls here, right? The two main ones, Cobbitts.
Yes.
And then, because what we really want to know is where are the gaps? Which service, AT&T, Verizon, et cetera, is, where those gaps are for each different service. And is there a way to have them, I would look at the contracts that we have with these services, if we are, renting them space or whatever, there might be some provisions in there, they have minimum quality standards that they have to have, and could the power be improved, the wattage or whatever it is that they have? Maybe they just have old equipment there and they need to put new equipment in there to cover more area. So we just need a little bit of information as to what the gaps, who's causing it and where is it? And then without having to go through an entire long presentation in terms of everything that we need to know about Shelter Island, because this is a much simpler place than I think the North or South Forks. And to do this in the summer is important because that's where a lot of people here are really straining the service. Before Cobbitts was placed, I used to have a hard time getting cell service on Ram Island, on Big Ram. It was tough. But I think more recently, at least now I get 2 bars, maybe 3. I get 2 bars here at Town Hall, by the way, on my phone, AT&T. That's not particularly good. So that's my question, can we have a short, and the other thing is, if you can cut this price down to like half the cost by just short circuiting it, maybe the associations contribute some of the money to do this, because if Hay Beach is having a problem and Ram Island's having a problem, and other areas they can just put $2,000 each and get this thing paid.
Thank you.
Or GoFundMe.
So Oh,
Go ahead.
I was just going to respond that we have really streamlined the process. And if you want to just have the maps and not involve the policy piece, we can certainly do that. And that would definitely bring your costs down.
Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak on this? Come on up.
John Needham, thank you for your proposal. Quick question, what would be your prediction for future comparing land-based systems versus satellite-based systems?
Well, I am attending a workshop tomorrow specifically on that exact topic. And I don't know if you heard, I'm in Atlanta attending ConnectX, which is a wireless industry annual conference, and they have a special presentation tomorrow on that very item. But I don't believe that the terrestrial land-based network is still the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of wireless infrastructure. The number of satellites that it would take in order to eliminate or greatly reduce the number of facilities that are on the ground versus in space would be astronomical. And it's a very expensive proposition to put up all that equipment. So you have AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, who have built their networks on the ground. And I would anticipate that would be the same pattern that you would expect at least over the next 10 years. We always recommend in your policy that you have a stipulation in your code about removal if a site is abandoned, so that in the future, if a site is no longer necessary, it gets taken down within 18 months of the cessation of use on that facility. So if you don't have that in your current code, then that would certainly be a recommendation, so that if for some reason, in 20 years, land-based sites are reduced, then you would be able to remove those other sites. But I will have more information after tomorrow.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so I will reiterate to the community to please reach out to Town Hall and let us know your thoughts. I will reach out to the homeowners associations, and then I may circle back to you, Susan, to just understand, like, if we eliminate, if we do task 1 and 2 per the proposal and eliminate some of the other, what kind of reduction costs we would have. Our next town board work session is going to be May 29th, because next week, the Board of Assessment Review is going to be in here all day on Tuesday. So we have no meeting, no work session next week. So thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Have a nice afternoon.
Yes, you too. Okay, our next agenda item is sidewalk legislation revision. We had talked about this and kind of settled on some language. I see Stephen is on, so he can speak to this more. Basically, what has changed in the current draft dated May 13th is the regulated sidewalk area definition. And that was, Stephen, nope, there you are. I will let you speak to this.
No, absolutely. So this law is currently written would only apply to paved sidewalks. So upon paved sidewalks, there should be a 3-foot pedestrian path free and clear of obstructions. We pivoted from a town-wide 3 feet from the edge of the road model, regardless if it was paved, dirt, grass, because due to topography and historical development on the island, Regulating this way would create a lot of nonconformity or even have no utility. So for example, in the Heights, there are fences, light poles, utilities within that area. If again, we did the 3 foot from the edge of the road. And then also people historically park in that area in commercial areas. And also in certain houses, they don't have on-site parking. So they would necessarily have to park in that 3 foot from the edge of pavement. And then additionally, when we did a review of sidewalks, there were several sidewalks that from the edge of the road in that 3 foot area, there was a nice slope. So the area that should remain unobstructed would not be able to be used by pedestrians for walking. So we went back to just regulating paved sidewalks. And and we went and took a tour with representatives from the Shelter Island Heights, and we went around to different problem areas. And I think it is a good number, having 8 feet from the roadside edge of pavement for existing sidewalks. So for instance, like in front of Stars, there's enough room for their tables and still hold a 3 foot area for pedestrian traffic. And then also, as we're aware, down on Bridge Street, sidewalks are quite large. So long as, the proprietors on that street keep a 3 foot area closest to the street unobstructed, they'll be all right.
Thank you. Any questions on this?
No, this was a good fix
Mhm.
because when we went and looked at it, 'cause I went on the walking tour, what we realized is it would take up a lot of the right of way in areas where there was no paved sidewalk or there wasn't an intention to actually regulate that space, but the way it was written, it did. So I think this was a good solution for it. Because we really only need it in the areas that have paved sidewalks in the business areas.
It's good. It's a good change.
Okay.
No issue with it.
Okay, so what we will do is we will set the public hearing on June 3rd and have the public hearing on June 24th. Okay. Right, that was a fast one. Next agenda item is proportionality lot size legislation.
Give them better than can. Look at the too late.
That's for us to read and consider.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
Want me to?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Meg, if you've sort of been on the subcommittee working on this.
Okay. So what, the legislation that we just passed was essentially to move the maximum square foot exemption from a special permit to an area variance. So we've done that, we've transitioned so that if you exceed the maximum allowable square footage for your construction, you need to go for an area variance now instead of the special permit process that was before. So what I'm proposing is that instead of just having a cap at 6,000 square feet, and you can build up to 6,000 square feet, and then you have to go for an area variance, I'm proposing more of a proportionality law so that the construction is proportional to the size of the lot that it's being built on. So what this would do is it would create a new maximum square foot cap for each lot size. So it wouldn't just be, you get 6,000 square feet no matter your lot size, because there are a lot of lots that are under half an acre, and under an acre that under the old law could have 5,999 square feet built on them. And, that is something that people have been complaining about recently. We've had that happen in a couple places where the complaint is that the house is too large for the lot that it's being built on, and it's imposing on neighbors. People are concerned about it draining resources. So
what I've done is I pulled all the assessor data for all the residential structures on the island. And I broke it down by lot size and square foot living area. And I created a couple different scenarios. And this one seemed to be the most balanced in that it creates some pre-existing non-conforming structures, 69 to be exact, 69 pre-existing non-conforming parcels. But it maintains the existing character of the different areas because it's not allowing things that are excessive beyond what is already there. And so this is where I started from. When I originally did the chart, I just went out to 6,000 square feet because it was a lot of work and I was tired and I wanted to see if anybody would even think it's a good idea. So since then, what I did was I extrapolated it out and I went up to 6 acres. So you'll see on the chart, you have less than an acre. There's an acre to 2 acres, 2 acres to 3 acres, 3 acres to 4 acres, 4 acres to 5 acres, and 5 acres to 6 acres. And then 6 plus is whatever our maximum limit is. Because of the way the basic calculation went, I then just extrapolated from that 6,000 cap out to 10,000 as your maximum if you have over 6 acres. We can adjust that however you want. There's an idea that in other municipalities, you actually get like a reducing percentage added on. So one of my thoughts was if we set our total cap at something more like 8,000 or 8,500 square feet, that's very doable by adjusting from the 2 acre, 6,000 square feet is your max at 2 acres. And I picked 2 acres because 2 acres is our basic zoning for AA. So it's a standard lot for AA zone. And it's the largest of our zoning lots, like required zoning sizes. And then after that, instead of going up by 50, go up by 25, then that puts the new max at 8,475 at 6 acres. So just something to think about. But when I made up the schedule, I hadn't really gotten feedback from anybody. So I went with the more restrictive of the options. And so another thing to look at when you look at this is for the lot size that is less than an acre, that will impact, there are 1,435 parcels that fit into that zone. For 1 acre to 2 acres, there is 773 parcels that would be in that zone. For 2 acres to 3 acres, there's 148 parcels in that zone. For 3 acres to 4 acres, there's 45 lots that are in that size zone. For 4 to 5 acres, there's only 24 lots that meet that zone. And for 5 to 6 acre lots, there's only 14 of those. And lots that are over 6 acres, there's 32 in total. So that's just some basic information on how it kind of breaks down. Most of
The quarter acre to 1 acre, what's that number?
1,435. And almost all of them are in the heights. So, one of the things is I would like to have the heights weigh in. They've already said that they're in favor of this kind of approach. They'd be interested in it. So I'd like to see how they feel about the numbers themselves. Because the less than an acre lots significantly impact the heights in particular. There's a few outside of the heights, but really only a handful. And then the 1 acre to 2 acres are kind of spread out island wide, but still strongly impact the heights.
So the result of this is if someone wants to build 7,000 square foot house and they go to the ZBA for a variance, the ZBA will be bound by this?
Yes.
So if it was less
So
than
if they had
7,000.
less than 3 acres, they
Well-
can't get the 7,000.
without an
no.
added variance.
Mhm.
Go, Stephen.
Sorry, I just want to chime in. So, if they, yeah, as Amber and Meg said, if they have the necessary square footage, they don't have to go to the ZBA. So instead of the ZBA having what some people felt was draconian 5,999 square feet across the board, even if you had 100 acres, so they want that right now is what they're bound by, 5,999 square feet, that number. Now this chart will replace that number and it's based on lot size. So if they wanted to say, if there was a 2-acre parcel, they're allowed to build a 6,000 square foot house pursuant to this chart. If they wanted to build an 8,000 square foot, they would have to seek a variance for that 2,000.
Oh, but, okay, but if-
This chart is going to replace the cap of 5,900 square feet.
got it. That's,
Right.
I like that. I like the cap.
I was gonna say, I was
I mean,
like, what?
no, I like the cap. I like it. I think, I was looking at this, Meg, I think it's a good thing for perhaps less than an acre. A given amount, and even reduce the size of the houses that you're allowing here. I think, I owned a home on a 1/4 acre, if that. And it was 1,500 square feet with a detached garage. The garage was maybe 4 feet off the property line. The rear yard setback was probably 10 feet. It had somewhat of a side yard, and the front was up toward the road. 1,500 square feet in a 1/4 acre where you have 3,000. That's, for me, that's
So,
oversized.
okay,
I mean, but I like proportionate in smaller lots.
Yeah.
Just your numbers are,
But Albert, let me just be clear about this. You're okay with if you have 4 acres, you can go up to 8,000?
no, I said I like the
Okay,
No.
okay.
So
999. I think that's a hard stop for me. Whatever, it's just my opinion. I want that.
So
But-
basically with this schedule, then what you're saying is maybe with some adjustments, when we get to 2 acres, it's 6,000 square feet, and then the rest of the chart goes away because it's 2 acres plus, and it just stops at 6,000.
I wouldn't even define 2 acres as allowing a 6,000 square foot house. Just the smaller lots proportionally reduce the numbers here. Or in protection for like C-zone. What is the lot on Babbage? What is that, 3/4 of an acre?
0.7, I think.
0.7.
Yes.
So let's go to the chart, 0.7, 3,900 square feet.
Mhm.
That's what's there now. That's what's been built there.
Oh, you
What?
mean, well,
No, start
actually,
again.
Joe,
because what they
yeah, I thought they were. bigger
went
than
over
but-
that.
But Joe Fenora.
Well, they went over it, so it's worse than.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Joe has some
Yeah.
examples for us.
But
I mean, it's larger than 3,900 and I mean,
So here's the thing, when I did this, I looked at all of the problem children, all the lots that weren't, people were complaining about. And under this, none of those would have been allowed as built. Like the one on Bowditch Road would not have been allowed according to this. They'd have to go to the ZBA for a variance. The Cheapwood Avenue one would have had to go to the ZBA for a variance because it was larger than what was allowed on this chart. So this chart looked at all of the ones that people were complaining about, and when I put it against this chart, they wouldn't have been allowed. They would have had to get a variance, or they would have had to modify their construction.
okay. So the lot on Bowditch is how big?
0.78
0.7. So they're allowed to build a 3,900 square foot house.
right in this.
What was the one that was built there? 4,000?
I have it on here at one point. I don't, because I didn't have to go for a variance.
That's-
It was less than
6,000.
6,000, so it
That's-
didn't have to go for a variance, that's the point.
Yeah, so it went straight to the building department.
Whatever, if it's 4,000 or whatever it is, it's close to that. I mean, I think that's way out of line. 3/4 of an acre. I mean, and I like the cap, I do.
I really think this is a good refinement, Meg, but I'm with Albert on the cap. I mean, you're thinking about 2 acres, 6,000 square foot house on 2 acres is just okay. Anything bigger than that, I like the cap. We don't need houses bigger than that anymore. But I like the refinement aspect below that, below the 2 acre, 6,000. Sure, we can tweak it. I mean, maybe Albert's right, a 1/4 acre, 3,000 square feet. Okay, that sounds a little big.
3,000.
Yeah, 3,000 square feet.
I mean, I think, you know, a point of reference is the 0.7 acre at 3,900. And that's, I think, what we're looking at on Bowditch Road. That's become a hot
And I
point.
had the numbers, it's significantly larger than that, what they built on Bowditch is larger than that.
I even think 6,000 on 2 acres is okay. 2 acres is a pretty big hunk of property. But we need to stop there.
I like the 6,000. I like the pyramid law. If we want to make adjustments on those smaller lots, the 1,435 lots that exist in that category.
Okay.
But
Most of those lots are already built anyway. I mean, so. How many 1/4 acre lots are out there in the wild for purchase and construction? Probably none?
I'd say look to the heights,
Yeah.
because that's where they're going to be.
No,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, in this environment, it doesn't matter. People come in and bulldoze and build whatever the heck they want. So just because they're, you know, so that's why you want to, I think you want to have this, what in essence would be a substandard lot law that restricts the size of square foot living area on a lot that's less than what's allowed in the zoning district.
Okay.
So
So,
I wanted to bring Joe in, I mean, unless you
Yeah.
want- just bring Joe in, because Joe, you had some visual examples for us to take a
Yes.
look at, sort of the interplay between small, proportionalities and pyramid law and how they would all fit together.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen here. Are you guys looking at a spreadsheet?
Yes,
Okay, this is what you need.
very small spreadsheet.
Yes. Unreadable spreadsheet.
yeah, maybe.
Okay, now you're looking at some scratch marks on a blank.
Yes.
CAD, yeah, got AutoCAD.
Okay, great. So I want to walk through with you a couple of property sizes that are drawn to scale under both the pyramid legislation and for proportionality. So I think you'll see after looking at some of these to scale that there's an important relationship between both of those components in mitigating oversized development on a given piece of property. So I think first we should probably start with the smallest and work our way up, because I think that's most relevant here. But the three white blobs that you see are the three classifications of zoning that we have. From the right to the left, it's B, B1C zone. The middle is your A zone, and the left is your AA zone. B, B1C all have the same minimum lot size requirements, so they're all lumped into one. But if we hone in here, you'll see that the B, B1C zone is a 1 acre minimum lot square footage of 40,000, 100-foot minimum frontage, 10-foot side and rear yard setbacks, and 30-foot front yard setbacks. The scale drawing that you see here in the center, that's the white zone is the building envelope for a minimum lot frontage. So it's 100 feet wide, and the total area is 1 acre, 40,000 square feet. So that gives you a sense of how much of a given lot is in the official building envelope in these 1 acre, on these 1 acre parcels in that BC zone. And when you apply the pyramid law to this particular lot, now we're looking at that same lot in section. So this 100 feet is the front yard, that's minimum front yard, minimum frontage, street frontage. And the angles here that you see, these dotted lines, that's your building envelope. This is like your vertical building envelope, or the sky plane, which we've talked about before. So these angles here are 45 degrees from the side yards. And this top line here is your ceiling. This is your maximum building height of 35 feet that's established by code. Without the pyramid law, you'd be able to build this full rectangle, the perimeter of the white hatched area. But with the pyramid law, you now remove these white sections from the building envelope. That's what's constraining the lot size from a vertical, volumetric component. So you have a pretty big impact on a given 1 acre parcel with this B/C zone minimum frontage and the side yard setbacks. And the reason for this big impact is because your side yard setbacks are only 10 feet. So you'd be reducing the volume of the building substantially. You couldn't reach the maximum building height of 35 feet until you were 35 feet from the side. And on a given minimum front yard lot, you'd only have 30 feet left in the center of the lot for your maximum height area. So by all measures, this is quite effective for the pyramid law in terms of reducing, particularly building volume close to the side yards. Now, keep in mind, this is just one scenario. I built this off of the 100-foot frontage, street frontage minimum. So you could have lots of different sizes, but I think it's helpful to see it at that 100, because that's presumably the worst case scenario for lot width that you'd be dealing with. So this is a great example of pyramid law being effective, and we would see that in those B and C zones in particular. And the difference here primarily is that you've got this 10-foot side yard setback. So that's what makes the pyramid quite strong and imposing. If we look at the same impact on our A zone, also 1 acre zoning, 140 foot is your minimum street frontage, so a little bit wider, and your side and rear yard setbacks increase pretty substantially, over double the side yard setback. And when we apply the pyramid law here, you'll see that the amount of white area that's reduced from the building envelope, the vertical building envelope, decreases substantially from the B and C zone. Now we're only looking at chopping off a section 10 foot wide for the upper 10 feet of the maximum building envelope. So again, here's your 35-foot ceiling, here's your 25-foot side yard setback, and you can see just visually the amount that you've reduced the building envelope on this bigger parcel just from pyramid is not very substantial compared to the B and C zone, where we had both 10-foot side yard setbacks and the slightly narrower lot. And the reason I bring this example up, and what we'll see in the next one, is it seems like, anecdotally, this legislation is geared towards large homes on these types of parcels, A and AA zone. So when we're looking at the impact of pyramid, I think you can see the decreasing impact of pyramid constraining development once you get a little bit larger. And you'll see as we move over to AA zone, which is 2 acre zonings with, again, slightly larger setbacks, slightly larger minimum frontage, we apply the pyramid law here, and you effectively have no impact, certainly no material impact on the development size within this typical lot. 160 foot frontage, 30 foot setback really only narrows you to this very small reduction in vertical development as you approach that ceiling. Arguably, nobody would even probably reach this full height of their structure this close to the setback anyway. So I think this particular example speaks to the need for some complementary legislation to directly go after these larger parcels where we're seeing the large homes being built. I'm showing also down here some other examples for you. We'll stay in the A zone for a bit. But this is just an example of a square 2-acre parcel. So what you see here is the boundaries of the property. And then what you see here is a structure also square. This is based off of the scaled SFLA that Meg presented in terms of occupancy for a given building on a 2-acre lot. So this actually represents a 6,000 square foot house square on a 2-acre parcel. This here represents a 1-acre parcel with let me just check the
4,500?
4,500. Yep.
100.
Yep. And this is the same because the same rules would apply for B and C.
Great.
So I think the point that I'd like to emphasize to the board is that pyramid can be very effective, but we have to, I think, certainly examine closely the impacts of the pyramid at these larger parcels, because you'll see diminishing returns on the pyramid once you have side yard setbacks that are approximately the same as your ceiling. So this 30-foot side yard setback and 35-foot maximum building height really don't allow the pyramid to be very effective here. Also, having to acknowledge that this is just an example lot. This is a lot with level grade, with the minimum frontage. Certainly, there are many lots that aren't square or even rectangular. They're polygons with unusual sides and angles, and that would create a much different building environment. But for your average, very typical condition, I think you can see the point here. And then likewise, something to consider, which my analysis takes no consideration of, is the impact that you might create here with nonconformity. So if this is a zone where there already are many structures, that's a worthwhile thing to look at, is how much nonconformity you might inadvertently create because of this strong impact here. And the answer might be not very many, or that you don't really care. That's perhaps what you're looking for. But
Joe, I have a quick question. In the pyramid law that we have drafted right now, there's a 10-foot augmentation. Did you build that into this as well?
No, this is not. So if the 10-foot would, that's similar to Southold, where you're saying you get a 10-foot vertical addition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that would reduce this, and I can get you those numbers for the additional, reduction, or the reduction in reduction under that circumstance.
Okay. What you've done really is a representative of what with the 10-foot.
Yeah, with the 10-foot and this.
Yeah, then it would shrink a little.
Yeah, this will shrink a little bit, cause less non-conformity, but concerned about non-conformity.
Yeah, so this number would go from 25 down to 15 as opposed, yeah.
But then because it decreases, then this kind of proportionality becomes more important.
Yeah.
That's where I was headed.
No, this is a great augmentation. Joe, thank you for the visual. It was extremely helpful to me, at least.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I think, as I started saying before, these two pieces can sort of play off each other on both ends of the spectrum, where you have pyramid law being less effective, your development would be more, your development constraints would be more reliant on your SFLA caps. And then perhaps on these other parcels where, as your discussion was just going, maybe 3,000 is too big for a half-acre lot or whatnot. As you go into those discussions, those are the lots where pyramid would have more of an impact. So, they can play off each other to get the desired outcome.
Yeah, it's kind of what you want, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially the whole purpose of proportionality is to scale the house to the lot size. So the cap, depending on your cap, doesn't make sense for the larger lots. If the argument you're going to get is, I have so much land that there's there's minimal impact if I add 100 square feet here or 100 square feet there. And so this kind of gives a scaling so that you get a reasonable request as opposed to some of these other things that we've seen in the past.
You know,
But if we have a cap, it's a cap.
although
I
sometimes,
think by doing this, you're looking to accommodate more.
Well, you're looking to be fair. So if someone has 6 acres and
What's
they
fair mean?
want to do 8,000 square feet, the land can accommodate that without imposing on neighbors, without straining resources. So if we can adjust the scale for this, this is just, the scale can be adjusted.
The resources of water, then it doesn't matter the size of the lot. If you have a bigger house that has 9 bathrooms instead of 4 bathrooms,
Oh, it absolutely matters on the size of the lot.
no, because the aquifers that you're drawing from is still the same, no matter how big the lot is.
But there's less demand in the space, like there's, so it's definitely different.
well, one of the arguments that we get when we've had special permits before is I have 4 acres. So if I don't get this variance of 6,000 square feet, then I'm going to build one 6,000 square foot house on 2 acres. I'm going to subdivide and put a 6,000 square foot house on the other. I mean, granted, the person has to go through
That's
with
a
it.
bluff you call.
And we've tried at times, but I mean, in that situation, you could have 2 6,000 square foot houses. In this one, with the current schedule, if they had to merge the lots to 4, then they'd be stuck at 8,000 square feet.
Right.
So, I mean, either one is going to cause them to go to either ZBA or planning board, but I'm just tossing that out there because that is an argument that has been prevalent in the past.
Yes,
The applicant has presented that.
yes.
Yes, yeah.
That's a
And
bluff.
in that given situation, they had no intention of subdividing.
Subdividing. and-
Whatever.
I mean,
First of all,
we've had
take 3 or
multiple.
4
Get
years.
specific, but
No, I mean,
And
we've
they
had
end up with
multiple.
the sign, I mean, call that one.
Mhm, yes. But just, I toss that out there just because property rights
Oh, yeah.
exist, and so someone could go down there.
No, I think it's a valid argument. I mean, I can adjust this to make the cap at, let's see, 8,475. That
That
could be the
number
new cap.
comes from.
Yeah, it's where'd that number come
I
from?
extrapolated out, so I left the 6,000 at the 2 acres, and then I took the 50 and said went to 25. If you do that, it cuts it back by 2,000 square feet.
4 point. So 4.5 acre, no.
No, at 6 plus acres, you'd get 8,475 square feet, that was the new cap. I mean, I did it quick, so it might be a little off by 25 square feet or something, but for a larger parcel, that's a little bit more reasonable because people want to, historically, we have been, as people like to say, a resort community. You look at Nostrum Parkway, those are larger homes on larger parcels. It is part of our community character. You go to certain parts of the island and you'd expect to see a larger house on a larger lot. So it's not detracting from community character in places where the acreage is there. I think it's almost more detrimental when you have these smaller lots that are getting overbuilt. And it's more detrimental to the resources because the smaller lots are closer together and you have higher density, which puts higher strain on things. Where you have larger lots in areas where it's mostly larger lots together, you have lower density and it's less strain on the resources. So an attempt on this is to manage the density in a way that is equitable and makes sense based on the resource that you're using.
Well, I'd like to see the chart as adjusted, maybe even cap it at 8,000, and let's have a look at it.
Okay.
And let's see what the people in the audience have to say.
I'm not in favor of that. I'll just put that out. I like the cap.
We
I'd
will,
like to see the numbers in the below 2 acres adjusted proportion, if we're gonna go with proportionality.
Oh, that as well, yes, sorry.
Well, what does that mean? So where do you want your numbers to start if you're less than an acre?
I think you said
If you're at
5%.
a quarter of an acre, 3,000 square feet, I think is a
So
Is it
option one that I
oversized?
gave you, let's see, where is it?
25, what was it, 2,500 and
I believe it was.
something.
Let me see. So option one started at 2,500 for a quarter acre and went up from there. So at a half acre, it would be 3,000. 3/4 acres, 3,500. 1 acre would be 4,000.
Yeah, well, I mean, make those changes as well, and let's have another look at this, because I think that's,
I'd like to see Joe's redo his, and I'd like to look at that as well.
Okay. All right, I'll make up a couple scenarios.
Okay.
Send them out.
I do like this.
Mhm. Yeah, we need
No, I mean, it
this.
makes sense, and it's really hard to, you can absolutely justify a larger house on significantly larger acreage, and you could even do a full secret review demonstrating how it's not gonna have negative impact on property. So when you put a cap at 6,000 square feet on 10 acres, it's gonna be really easy to lose that in court, I think. When someone's saying, I have property rights, there are things I'd like to do, these are the reasons why. You know, I feel like
I don't
the
think
thing.
that's
I
a
mean, I
loser. We have the ability to limit that and not lose
I
that.
mean, the ZBA will look at that, those conditions, and see how it applies to the application,
yeah,
you know, without putting
I'm
it
just trying to
down,
be reasonable.
without putting it on paper like this.
Haven't lost it yet, Martha's Vineyard, and their cap is what, 3,500?
so,
So, yeah, let's have a look.
all right, I'll come up with a couple different scenarios and I'll send them out.
Yeah.
See where it goes. All right,
Because this is pending legislation and there will be public hearings, we don't open it up for commentary, but if people have comments, they can grab us individually, send us letters.
Don't stop me.
I'm sure we will.
Don't stop me in the idea.
I think we should open it
No,
up.
sorry.
I don't know why we don't do that. I think,
Because there's going to be public hearings, and if we start to open up legislative changes for public, to public comments, we will turn this into public hearings at every single work session.
but
We've done that
But
before.
don't we get a better piece of legislation by doing that, by getting input from the public?
And we.
Before we schedule a hearing and then,
But what ended up happening with the sidewalk legislation is we did get a correspondence from the Heights who said, hey, you may want to, or it may have been a phone call. You may want to take a look at this. So we pulled it. We didn't set the public hearing on that date. We went back and looked at it. So I put forth a timeline, but it can change based upon what kind of input that we get. It's just, not everyone, if we do it at work sessions, not everyone gets to hear what the public comments are. Whereas at a public hearing, it is, the public gets to weigh in at once. We get to hear everybody's commentary. That's why we started to read in correspondence at public hearings for those who were not able to. So, and there may be times where we say, okay, this, we heard the public hearing, now we're gonna go back and redraft, and then we have a second public hearing.
but
Like,
by
we don't have to
letting
do
the
it in one
public,
shot.
but by letting the public speak, we don't have to worry about redrafting, then re-notifying a hearing. That's all. We're getting it up front largely.
What would prevent me from coming next week at the beginning of the meeting? It's not on the agenda.
Because if it's legislation, we're not entertaining those comments.
You wouldn't entertain the comments at all, but he's making a good point. Why, by the time you get to the public hearing, it's already a fait accompli with no public input other than letters.
But
Well, I was gonna say with the written comment, it's easier to take it in, process it, make adjustments before it gets brought back to the board and the public for more comment. Sometimes when it's said at the meeting, we lose it in translation. So we might start a discussion with you, but then get distracted, there's nothing to fall back on, there's no paper trail to remind us, oh, right, this is what we talked about, these are the adjustments. So sometimes when it comes in writing, it's easier to deal with in the long term, easier to incorporate. At least for me.
And also, I mean, there's been times where our conversations at the table over the years, even before I got on the board, were just shot down. And there was no good discussion at this level because we were just getting yelled at in meetings for that's wrong, you can't do this. And mostly before I got on the board for the short-term rentals. So I sort of use that as our base, and we are, like, I'm reading everything that comes in from people, and we're taking it into account. I think it's a fairer process in the long run, and it's what is done in other towns. So it's not like we're recreating the wheel here, we're just
Well, and I think
changing
also
the process.
bringing it up for discussion amongst us, a lot of times it changes direction significantly before it even gets to the point where it's ready for some kind of
Yes.
public hearing.
Yeah, which was, you know, if I, like, short-term rentals is always my go back to, it's like, what people were yelling about didn't even make it into legislation, because it was like an idea that was just tossed out there by a board member, and then the other board member shot it down, but before that could even happen, the
Right.
public was shutting it down.
We disagree. You're not convincing,
Okay.
whatever. No.
Are there three who want to override me on this one? No.
Yes, yes, yes.
Well,
We know that, we know.
Because when it gets to the comprehensive plan, I'm not gonna be able to
Most of the
survive.
problem is, it's gonna be biased in favor of someone like me who just loves to write, you know, and I can write. And then people who
Not
really
necessarily.
just have an idea, we're not gonna sit down to write. That idea's not gonna be heard.
Not necessarily,
well,
because
they can send
we,
us emails. And
yeah, and not necessarily because
people
we,
have them to check.
yeah, we are elected by the public, so we do represent the public. We were the ones elected and chosen, so.
Yeah, but
We come in with
the reason
our,
why you have speech is to make sure good decisions are made.
and that's the public hearing. That is the public hearing.
It's kind of too late. up to
It's
the-
not, it's definitely not.
And just one other point, you referenced fairness. People who come here have a certain perspective and on a certain piece of legislation. If they were able to make that position known during a work session, the other party that might have a different position, was not given notice that this topic was going to be discussed and this issue was going to be vetted. And, the appropriate time for it is at a public hearing. And work sessions are for, again, the town board to work. And, most municipalities don't allow the public to speak at all during work session, if not all. I think all. I think it's safe to say all. But, you do let, the public to chime in on things that they won't have an opportunity to have their say in. And that's, shows that it's the Shelter Island. And, that's good. But, you have to really look out for people who are not here at this point, and their voices won't be heard in shaping legislation, if that's the goal, to hear people to shape it at this
It
point.
is on the agenda, right? This legislation is on the agenda.
Yes.
It was no.
Yes, with an asterisk that you can't speak about.
I mean, that, I don't, whatever.
Mhm.
Stephen, whatever, I disagree. I just don't, it's on the agenda, and there's an asterisk now with no discussion. And I think it's wrong, but enough,
But people can
enough
reach out to
said.
us, and that's why we discuss it at multiple work sessions as well, so that it does give the public time to send us stuff for us to consider. So this will be on the agenda on 29th for us to revisit.
Before we leave it, I'm just thinking about it. Is the wetlands, is that gonna be on the next town board meeting?
We
Bring
have
it
our
back
next-
from the planning board?
I was gonna say we have our next legislative meeting on the 30th, so it wouldn't be in time.
Oh, that's right, that's right. You weren't able to find a common ground.
Yeah.
I was hoping to put it on for,
For the 29th.
but you're pretty far along in that.
Yeah.
So we're not bringing it back to the town board on the 3rd, at the town board meeting, the wetlands applications back to the town.
That, right now, it is on, I have adopt or reject on June 3rd's town board meeting. That would be when we would adopt it or reject it or postpone it.
What is it, June 3rd? Is it June, or what is
Yeah,
it?
June 3rd is our next town board meeting.
Yes, that's all, that's what I was saying.
Yes. Yeah, and there's a couple of things I wanted to, like, for that jurisdictional change, there's still a couple of things with respect to hiring an engineer who's going to review the applications for us and an environmental person to be engaged. So by the time we start taking in wetlands applications. We've got our staff, so to speak, in place.
Okay, all right.
There's
Well,
some work to be done.
happens.
Yeah, there's some work to be done in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so that is proportionality. Then next is,
Traffic changes.
And doc fees.
no,
Oh,
dock
dock
fees.
fees.
Yes. All right, so when we had passed the resolution at the May 13th meeting? No, it was before then. Anyways, we bifurcated this so that we passed the dredging fees for $175 and repairs at $175. But the question that was brought up at the before the, I guess, last week? Yeah, or maybe not last week, but whatever meeting it was, we just wanted to get clarification from WMAC to input about, let's see, just looking back at my notes, whether a modification or alteration of a dock should be charged the same low permit fee as a repair of a dock or required to obtain a permit if the modification or alteration is less than 10,000. So my understanding is if it's less than 10,000, no application, no permit is needed, so there's no fee. And so if it's greater than 10,000, it would be $175 because we want to encourage people
Right.
with low fees to.
I think we got confused at the last meeting, and that's why we were like, wait,
Yes,
why?
exactly.
Because we were thinking if it was less than $10,000, it was the $175 permit, not realizing that if it's less than, then you don't need the permit.
Mhm.
So that's our confusion.
And so I think the question that came back from the chair of WMAC is just making sure that repairs are treated differently than alterations and modifications.
Yes.
So that it's on the building department when they get a permit application or actually it's on, no, it goes to WMAC. So it's on them to make sure like, hey, this isn't just a repair. This is new and therefore.
The WMAC will ask for a reduction in the nonconformity of a dock
Yeah.
if they want to modify it in any way. I think that was the.
Yeah, so we just have to make sure internally it goes in the right bucket. So the response was if it's an alteration or modification, then it should be the full fee of 5,000 in total. Application fee, 1,250, and permit fee, once it's completed, 3,750. And that was just a flat, we're getting rid of the number of piling count, and we weren't going to a square footage. Although I know there are those in the community that think that we should go with the square footage because if you build a bigger dock, you pay more. And so there might be some incentive for people to keep their docks to a minimum size if they're going to pay less of a fee. But I don't know if there's anyone in the public who wishes to speak to that.
Well, in the dock legislation that the WMAC is working on, they're trying to keep it to 100-foot dock, right? So there should be very few instances where the dock exceeds 100 feet.
Mhm.
And if it does, that's go for variance.
Right. So then it may not need
Right,
separate
okay.
fee structure.
Any more discussion at this table? Okay, because this is a resolution and it's not legislation, we can open it up to the public. And I know there's someone from the public who wishes to speak on it.
You, John.
That would be you, John.
Yeah, I'm trying to get some clarity also. In my experience with that. So Meg, you just mentioned 100-foot max length. But there's also 50-foot side allowance. So you can go out 100 feet, and you can go sideways laterally 50 feet. So now you've got 50% more square footage on that structure.
I didn't even think of that. This is why you're the man.
Think about
The
it.
dock master.
One thing that wish I was clear on the $10,000 non-permit level. I think that's for repairs only.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so here's a real life example. This is within the last year. The applicant wanted to add splashboard. In fact, this request was to double up on the splashboard they already had. So that's a new
That's an alteration.
Modification.
alteration. So it wouldn't fall within that $10,000.
No,
Be a new type of fee structure.
Yeah.
And so what's the fee structure for an alteration?
it would be the same as applying for a new dock because it has to go through the whole process. So for the modification or alteration like that, where they want to add to the dock or change the orientation of floats or whatever, it has to go through the whole WMAC process and then come to the town board for approval. So it would be the same fee structure as a new dock application.
See, you got it.
Yeah.
That's it, part.
Yeah, because it's,
The only point I'm trying to make is that there's a lot of iterations,
Mhm.
particularly that 50-foot, much bigger, so that's a lot more structure in the water than a straight out dock. And that was a traditional dock, straight out, did a pulley system. There wasn't anything with floats. And so as properties are changing hands, the new owners, they don't want that pulley thing, they want a float. So that's being added to the existing docks, as long as it doesn't make the conformity get worse, as long as it stays within the conformity.
Thanks, John.
I think we covered it.
yes, yeah, so to answer your question, the existing code, which is being worked on and getting close. So if it exceeds 10,000, you need a permit. If it's a repair other than in kind and place, you gotta come. If there was no previous permit issued for that dock, so maybe if it was, built many years ago, pre-code, then you would need to come for a permit. If there's less than 30% of the original structure in remaining in a sound condition, you need to come in for a permit. If you're extending utilities, water, electric cable, anything, then you have to come in. So
You're hired.
it's pretty much any kind of change.
Good, great, thank you.
So where do we go? It's an L-shaped dock.
Then it's the same permit fee as a new dock.
Yeah, unless we want to,
Change it to a square footage.
Alteration.
yeah, if we want to change it to square footage to try and. But then we'd need to look at the, so if we're looking at a fee of 5,000 is our base fee, and we kind of like figure out what we want that to be the base fee. If it goes from 5,000 to 7,500, is that enough of a disincentive for someone who wants that L-shaped dock?
No.
Probably not. Well, if they're gonna build.
Spend a couple $100,000 on a dock.
Exactly. So while, the square footage calculation is admirable, I just don't think it's gonna deter anybody. So what are we trying to accomplish? I think the 5,000.
I think what we really should be trying to accomplish is to make sure for any major change that the plans get submitted so they can be looked at and reviewed.
Yes, exactly. All right, so then if this is good, we can put this on for adoption on June 3rd.
Yep.
Okay, I forgot to ask the Zoom audience.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Come on up, and if anyone in the Zoom audience, just raise your hand.
I think I'm gonna have to respectfully disagree. It's not gonna make any difference. I think it sets a tone for what direction the town wants to go in as far as structures in the water. Now, are we supporting more structure or less structure? I think it sets the tone.
Okay. Although we are working on the code, so I think there's gonna be a lot of
That'll
tone
set the
setting.
tone,
that's
yeah.
coming. I've been sitting in as an observer on those meetings. There's a lot of,
Yes,
Tone
they're
setting
very
going
interested
on.
in setting the tone.
yes,
And we can modify this if we need to after the code is adopted.
yes.
Makes sense.
I think it is a good point, the square footage.
Mhm.
I know it was being considered early on.
Yeah.
I don't know if they actually really took a vote on that aspect of the rewrite, the revision,
Mhm.
where they have started to do that. See, this goes back to for me, it goes back to the point I was trying to make, that somebody from the audience made what I think is a very constructive comment, but yet we have the opportunity
Mhm.
to consider it, but that's my point.
Yes.
Well, if we have, let's say you're going with a standard 100 foot by 5 feet wide, right?
5 feet.
5 foot deck,
Yeah.
dock. I mean, it's essentially $10 a square foot. So anything over and above that, you just add an additional $10 a square foot. So you get a standard 100 foot, and then after that, it's all extra.
Mhm.
That's
I think it's a consideration.
Want to give a discount for a 4-foot wide?
It's always an option, but we were trying to make things simpler.
Well, what's the feeling? Do we want to?
I like that you wrote down discount before.
I like that comment.
$10 a foot.
Actually, put this- the moratorium's in place, so this is not a burning issue.
No, it's just a matter of just getting it off the plate.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just trying to clear the decks a little bit.
I think it's worth, I'd like to bring it back to the WMAC, even if it's not in a monthly scheduled meeting. I know they've been working on the code.
Yes.
Revisions along the way
Mhm.
to see input.
Okay,
So we have 3 months, so.
yes. However, I mean, yes, we have 3 months. However, right now it is based upon pilings, number of pilings, and so that's just unworkable and there has.
Well, the piling, not the issue, the square footage is the issue.
No, the existing resolution.
existing.
is based on, so do we want to at least get that corrected and then that allows WMAC to?
We need to fix the existing.
Yeah,
Yes,
let's fix the
it's
existing.
problematic, so
We
I
can
don't want
fix
it
it
to fall
again if we
through.
have to.
Exactly, I don't want it to
Yeah.
fall through the cracks, because
Got it.
oftentimes these things do, yeah.
Scheduled for June, I think
Okay.
so.
Okay. And the two liaisons can take it up with WMAC and come back with anything, but
We will
I don't
do
think
that.
I don't think they want to take it up until after they're done with
Mhm.
the dock moratorium.
Yeah.
Okay. Next on the agenda is proposed traffic changes in the Heights. And so we don't have any legislation on that, and Stephen, you were going to take the lead on.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the town board's fine with the crosswalk and the no parking off Chequet. If the town board is fully on board with it, I will have legislation that we can set a public hearing at the next town board meeting. We just got to get the specific language for those particular areas. So I'll work with the chief and Ken on that.
And Christina's just put up what the proposed crosswalk, where it is, what it looks like. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I think it makes sense. When I walked the Heights the other day, it connects the already existing crosswalk to the easement. It just makes sense.
Yeah, people are already walking there.
And it might slow people down while they're trying to get to the ferry a little bit.
Yeah, let's protect them.
Yeah.
All right, next on the agenda is.
Fireworks fundraiser.
I was gonna say 2 outdoor Sunday permits. What I was going to do is switch up the order, fireworks fundraiser, because you have to recuse yourself on the Sylvester Manor one, so might as well keep you here for that one.
That's okay.
Yes, let's do the
Yes.
fireworks fundraiser.
Thank you. Hi.
For you.
Hi, thanks for coming to my meeting. This is, it's so nice to see everyone. This is the 65th annual fireworks, and I am not proposing the fireworks permit right now because the Coast Guard and the DEC and every other agency is still working on it. But this is for the fundraiser that we hold at SALT the night before. This is a party that we have traditionally done in years past. It is the single largest fundraiser for the fireworks. As I said, this is the 65th annual. We took over in 2015. Since then, because I can't speak to what was before, we are an entirely volunteer organization. We raise over $60,000 from island donors every year. It is a Herculean task, to say the least. And so we are asking for the noise ordinance permit for this party. As I said, it is the one event where we raise the most money. We do a lot of things in and with the community to raise money going up to it, around it. We have a pickleball tournament coming up. We have all sorts of fundraising. So that is what I am here to ask for.
So this is for a noise exemption. It's the same request we've gotten a couple years in a row.
Yep.
You guys have live music up at the Shipwreck.
Correct.
The event itself is from 6 to 11 p.m.
Correct.
They set up during the day and then they clean up that night, and a little bit the next day, but mostly you're done that night.
Everything is done that night because we actually go from there to setting up the fireworks.
Right. So,
No sleep. It's all going, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, everything in your application looked good. I ran it back past the police chief and he didn't have any problems with it. So it's really up to the board here. Does anybody have any questions for Catherine?
Are they still planning on loading the barge at the yacht club? 'Cause
That's a different
That's a
application.
different application.
Different application.
I just haven't seen anything about
Oh, that's okay, yeah, so different application and we'll find out, TBD.
it. Okay.
Stay tuned.
So this is just essentially for the SALT fundraiser party.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I have-
Yeah, I have no concerns.
Great, I appreciate it. You
Love the
guys-
fireworks.
The board has been very supportive. We are so unique on Shelter Island that we get to celebrate 2 4th of July weekends. And the fireworks, this year they're on the 13th. Because when I talked to the PCR, the man in charge, that's what the request was. So we get a really nice, long 4th of July celebration. Hopefully it has, people out here with families enjoying the time. And I know when we initially took over the fireworks, it was because Brett and Kelly remembered it from when they were kids and they wanted to share that with their kids. And now their kids are getting older. And so it's like a very special thing for us.
It is.
So we'll do the noise exemption approval at the next board meeting.
Perfect.
Do we have any, because it's a resolution, is there any public questions while we still have Kat? Zoom audience. Okay, you're good.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat.
So we will now move on to, you need to recuse yourself because.
And recuse
Well,
myself
you're no
due to my
longer-
history at the Manor, even though I no longer am on the board. But I was.
Going into executive session after this? I was supposed to be here for work.
No, that was not, we still have another agenda item, but we don't have an executive session for today.
Yes, he commented. He could be here.
Yes, he couldn't be here and neither could Benjamin. So and also I think the attorney, I don't think was available either. So it was never confirmed.
Okay.
Okay, so the next outdoor assembly permit is the Sylvester Manor Farm to Table.
Right. So with the farm to table event, they're requesting a noise exemption, no other town services. However, with an open violation that they're working on remedying, it's not really appropriate to issue them a permit.
I agree.
So essentially what we'd like to do is deny the noise exemption application.
Okay.
If it was just the event and they weren't requesting a noise exemption because it's all self-contained and no town services are requested, they could hold the event. So the only reason that they have to, and the only reason SALT had to was because of the noise exemption.
Right.
So it will be denied.
We'll deny the noise exemption request.
They can have their event, but they cannot make noise of the issue violations.
All right, so we'll send that letter out.
Yes. Is there any commentary from the public on this one? Okay, there being none, we will move on to around the table board member reports. Started, you all getting your notes together. Let's see. Community Housing Board met last week. They reviewed the feedback that they had gotten from the public session. And so there's going to be another one on May 25th at, under the library tent from 1 to 4 p.m. So it'll be another opportunity for the public to come and weigh in on the different designs. Of the designs, I think that the one that was consistent among all three properties, I cannot think of the name of it, was the most popular one.
It's kind of like a cape, was it?
Yeah, yeah. I just can't remember the name, but anyways, there'll be another public session for people to weigh in. But all in all, there was good attendance at that event, and the board was happy with the feedback that they received. Meeting coming up where we're working on the request for proposal. So when we start to move towards, we've got the designs picked out, then how do we move forward to have, get bids in on people building them. So that's the next step. And also the zoning, working with the zoning lawyer specifically for the site plan at the old highway building on South Ferry Road. ADU +1 is the first one from round one. The first ADU from round one is getting ready to break ground. It's the first one in the state. The 10 municipalities that were awarded this ADU +1. So Little Shelter Island leading the pack on that. And the next round should open up in July possibly. CBC-LI, because of the way we utilized a lot of their resources to get our first round of funding done, they need to get ready for us in case there's the equal interest. And I think that there will be, because I think as people start to see breaking ground and hearing more about it, that hey, if they can do it, maybe I can do it too. So, but sometime in July, hopefully, and there will be another public session to invite everyone in who's interested to ask any questions and hopefully bring in someone who is doing one to give their feedback on the process and pitfalls and experiences and things like that. That was it for community housing. West Neck Water met on Friday. I'm sure people have seen up at the Shelter Island Country Club, a lot of Suffolk County Water Authority trucks up there. Wells number 5 and 6 are being replaced. So 5A is completed and tested, and the water quality is excellent. And then hopefully by the end of this week, 6A will have been completed as well. And then that just keeps the West Neck water system strong. And they wanted some redundancy, and it should be there. So that's good. I think what else? There was discussion about irrigation. West Neck Water has always had its prohibition against non-manned irrigation, like you can stand there with your hose and water, but you can't have a system. And whether or not to keep our stricter West Neck Water guidelines or the ones that Suffolk County Water Authority uses, and theirs are less, they're more lenient. And so actually Suffolk County Water Authority would like to adopt West Neck Water across Long Island, or at least the east end of Long Island. So, West Neck Water Board is going to keep ours, and we want to, and I guess the irrigation committee is working on smart controllers, which is something that was discussed and should be implemented. So I think that's part of what's in process. And
they never allowed irrigation systems in West Neck. So have arisen in the district. And I think that it really leads to the bigger picture
Mhm. Yeah.
of what we want to do,
Mhm. Yes,
really.
yes. Mhm. Oh, and then the last thing
Or
was.
what we have to do, or what we should do, rather.
Mhm. Yes. The last thing is when Wells 5A and 6A are in place, there are a couple of people, I think one is within the district and there may be one just on the border or a couple on the border. We need to just go back and look at the contract that we have with Suffolk County Water Authority to see how and who can be added to the district. But, so that may be something that starts to play out in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I
we
do know
just
there are
need-
2 people waiting, they want to be on the district.
Yes, yeah, I know, I remember a house that was within the district,
Mhm.
and they just were waiting for adequate capacity because the district was maxed out. And I know there's, concern like with the 2 new wells that a lot more capacity could go on, but really the additional capacity that's being built in by Suffolk County Water Authority is the redundancy between the wells, as well as like the number of gallons that are on average pumped are, well below what the capacity is. But when you get into the summer season and everyone's getting up and taking showers, first thing in the morning or coming back from the beach on a sunny day, that's when you see the spike in capacity. And that's what they're trying to guard against.
They have to be able to cover the surge for when everybody gets up in the morning and starts cooking, or when everybody goes to bed at night and takes a shower.
Mhm. That's all that I had.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you were gonna talk about it, right? I was gonna talk about that meeting, but Joyce Novak came in and stole all my thunder. She did a better job than I could have done.
With pictures too.
At any rate.
She had visuals.
CPF meeting, the CPF committee had gone to a consultant to advise them on the West Neck Preserve. Full of mudwort, what to do, what can be done. They turned it over a couple times and planted wheatgrass, which is really exceeding expectation. I don't know if you've been by, it looks great. So now they want to get the consultant back to kind of look at creating more of that on the preserve itself. Signage, the maps of the preserves, they're gonna they want to lay out a trail map for the white property. And the QR codes need to be rectified and ensure operation. That people can go in on the QR code on the map and be able to see the trails and the layout on the preserves. Volunteer stewardship plans they're working on. That's CPF. And then the WMAC has been continuing to work on the dock revisions.
Yeah.
It should be coming to the board soon.
Yes.
That will throw something else out of it.
There's another meeting, I think they set up.
We might skip.
I may skip it?
Because the goal is the final distribution, so we might just distribute.
Oh, okay, I thought they were gonna have a meeting on the 24th.
On the 22nd, it's preliminary set.
Okay, all right, well, that's good to know, because I sat in at the tail end of that meeting, just.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see what I got. So, on to the pet meeting. I had a rec commission meeting on Monday, and the rec department has all their summer programming up on the website, so check it out. They have lots of cool things for your kids to do this summer. If you are a lifeguard and you would like a summer job, reach out to the rec committee or the rec department. They're also going to be looking to start a youth basketball and youth soccer. They're not put on the website yet because they're not totally sorted out, but those would be, I think basketball is scheduled for Wednesday nights and then soccer, hopefully Tuesday, Thursdays. So those will be coming down hopefully soon. But that's what they've been working on. They do get some new equipment, some fun stuff going on in the gym. Shred Day is going to be May 25th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the recycling center. Everybody loves Shred Day. So bring all your papers and documents and have them shredded. We are still working on the wetlands code review. Our next meeting for that is going to be on the 30th. We had a lot of conflicting schedules, so we couldn't meet again before then. But we're working on updating the wetlands legislation and, hopefully we are able to wrap that up pretty soon. Otherwise, I think that's all I had. Yeah, okay.
All right, that's it on the agenda. So we'll entertain a motion to close the meeting.
I make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.